Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mormonish. I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Landon.
And we are so excited. We have a really good friend on with us today, which I absolutely love. We have the wonderful Jacki Matthews. How are you, Jacki?
I'm great. How are you guys?
We are fabulous. And this is like a last minute thing. Like, Jacki is the kind of person where we're like, come on and do this. She's like, okay. I love that. I love people like that. So, this is another episode that kind of is coming out of our The Good Book Club meeting. I think we should just go straight to our first slide. We read the book Unorthodox by Debora Feldman. We had a wonderful virtual meeting, and Jacki was our discussion leader because every time we have a book club meeting, it's every second Sunday of the month at 11 a.m. People volunteer so nicely to be the one that, kind of facilitates the conversation and leads it. And this book was so interesting. We read the book. A lot of us watched the series that's loosely based on Netflix, but just the parallels. And in the book club, we read just a variety of nonfiction, and we kind of discuss all of it through the lens of Mormonism. And this book had a lot more of the lens in Mormonism than I even thought it would. I mean, I think it might have been triggering to some. It was revelatory to others. It was pretty incredible just to make the comparisons of this one woman's story. So we invited Jacki on, like I said, very last minute and said, let's do this presentation again. And we're just going to discuss this because it's really amazing. I wonder if any of you have read this book. If you haven't, I would suggest grabbing it on Audible. Go get a hard copy because this story is incredible of just a brave woman and her journey leaving, we can all probably relate to that, leaving an environment where she was raised in, didn't know anything different, at great peril in some cases, and losing family, losing relationships, but rising above. So let's just turn it all over to Jacki. We're going to have a great conversation talking about Unorthodox, the Scandalous Rejection of My Hasidic Roots by Debora Feldman.
Okay, well, this is going to be exciting. It is a very thought-provoking book. Very difficult to read certain parts, heartwarming, all the emotions of the human experience for sure. And she's just one that really gets you thinking. And it was really, really a privilege to study and look at this book and work through a presentation for everyone, because I think she's quite remarkable. So my background is I have an undergraduate in history and I have a master's degree in geography. So all of this kind of background and Orthodox Jews and all of that is fascinating for me, and it's kind of my happy place. So I was very happy to prepare this presentation for book club, and then it's kind of fun to do it again. So hopefully we can get people, I guess we said, excited about the book and to read it and make the comparisons we want to make in our own individual lives. So let's go to the next slide. We're going to kind of do a brief little history of the Hasidic Jews and the Jewish people in general. So as we, of course, know, the Jewish people have always been in Jerusalem, right? In the state of Israel. That's where Jesus was. And there was always a group that stayed there. But as things progress, people started moving and going, and we'll talk about this movement, but kind of broke into two groups, the Ashkenazi Jews and the Sephardic Jews. And they kind of migrate out of Israel, we can say Jerusalem, at about the same time, but they go to different places in Europe and North Africa. So let's go to the next slide, please. So in the late first century, the Ashkenazi Jews, there we go, Ashkenazi Jews.
Ashkenazi, okay, we're going to learn some new words.
I know, and I looked it up, Ashkenazi. The Ashkenazi Jews migrated from Jerusalem into the Holy Roman Empire. And then in the Middle Ages, they've pushed further into Northeastern Europe. They spoke Yiddish, which was really High German, and it was written in the Hebrew alphabet. And if you know anything about Judaism, you do not speak Hebrew when you're dealing with the Ashkenazi Jews, because that is too sacred of a language. It is not to be spoken in regular every day. And so they spoke this High Yiddish, which was really just a High German of that the Middle Ages time, and put it with an Hebrew alphabet. Now, as time wore on, a little bit of Polish jumped in, a little bit of Russian jumped in, and the Ashkenazi derived their biblical name from a man by the name of Ashkenaz. And the Jewish people love their genealogy like Mormon people do. And he goes back, and he is the first son of Gomer, who was the son of Japheth, who was the son of Noah.
Oh, he goes right back there then.
So he goes right back, and they claim their genealogy. They come right out of Noah. So this is this group of the Ashkenazi. Okay, next slide.
Doesn't everybody come out of Noah eventually?
I guess technically,
yeah. Noah for sure.
It's interesting. So they left first century. So this is after the destruction of the temple by the Romans, not back when the 10 tribes left or anything. They left after Jesus, after the destruction of the temple, and then they went out into the Roman Empire.
Yes, and it's late first century. It's not like right after. It's not like right after the Romans came in and sacked everything. It's more like 800-900s. They just start moving. And I think you get bigger. You need, you know how it goes. What do people move and travel? Expand, more arid land, a new place to go and grow. So this is where the Ashkenazi come from.
Very interesting.
And then we have the Sephardic Jews. And literally Sephardic is translated to be Jews of Spain. Sephardic is Spain in your Hebrew vocabulary. And they migrate from Jerusalem to the Iberian Peninsula, again, in kind of the first centuries CE. And they kind of end right into the Iberian Peninsula, which is, Spain and Portugal. And they're doing great. You've got the Muslims are in charge there. They're open to all kinds of people. It's a very thriving empire. And then in 1492, the Reconquista comes, and it's the Christian, we're going to take it all back. And they come rolling in, and the Jews are told, convert, migrate, or we'll execute you. And so lots of conversions, unfortunately, some executions, and then a vast majority start migrating into the Middle East, North Africa, and South and Southeast Europe. So this is why, if you've ever watched the news and that, and maybe we're talking about Syria or Jordan, and there's Jewish sects there, this is where this comes from. And they moved in, they've been there for years and years, the 1500s, 1600s, they're in North Africa. This comes from this movement. And it's important to know that this group does not speak Yiddish. And this group is dispersed. And then after the Holocaust, a major group of the Sephardic Jewish people go back to Israel. And they're part of saying, we're going to start the state of Israel. And so they're part of this group. This is another reason we have the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic they're a little bit at odds with each other. And one thing I want to heads up everyone as we listen to this presentation, I found it fascinating as we break down these Jewish sects, that the further you break them down and the more, what's the word I want? Far right, conservative they get, the more it's us versus them. Yeah. And it's us versus them in their own Sephardic Satmar dynasty. So this is kind of the first part. We have these two Jews, Ashkenazi, Sephardic. Both of them say, well, we're a little better than the other, but you'll find as we further on in the presentation that they get uptight about don't marry outside. Ashkenazis should marry Ashkenazis, Sephardic should marry Sephardic. So, I don't know what it is about our human brains, but we like to, divide, and this is your side and this is our side, and our brain likes that.
Yeah, we like to form groups, stay in groups. We like to police the groups. That just happens no matter what.
It is. It's just, it's the reality of we as humans.
Yep. I thought I read somewhere that Ashkenazi, that group produces like an inordinate amount of the geniuses that we have with very high IQ comes out of that group. I think that's where Einstein and when we think a lot about the Jewish geniuses that come up with things, I think a lot of them came from that Ashkenazi, if I remember reading that correctly.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me. That was the biggest group for sure. And historically, Jewish people were never allowed to own land, and they couldn't get into the guilds. And so the only job they could really do was be money changers. And then as we talk further about the Ashkenazi, you value so much studying the Torah. So this long history of studying and learning, very, very important to the Jewish people. And especially when they couldn't go into the trades, they couldn't own land, they couldn't farm. So, maybe their brains just kind of evolved to, they do academia, man.
It's in the culture. Yeah.
It's in the culture, and it's how they learn and write. So that's the group. We can go to the next slide. So I want to kind of throw in here a geopolitical term called the Shatter Belt. And the Shatter Belt is a region that is caught in the middle of two political powers. And it becomes very important strategically when they're in the middle of two major powers fighting. And I mean, just in the recent history, this was the Napoleonic Wars, World War I and World War II. And where this took place was what they called the North European Plain, which is all of North Germany, all of Poland, into Ukraine, Belarus, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, clear into Russia, Moscow, into the Pyrenees. And the Pyrenees are not a physical boundary. Any major group has been able to go right over the Pyrenees, but it's a major flat plain. And so you can't defend it. That's why Switzerland has been able to be neutral for so many years, because they're surrounded by mountains. True. It is so hard to penetrate. And that kind of allows this neutrality. They can stay out of things. And they were able to just do very well, financially and in every race in those ways. Whereas in the Shadow Belt area, all through Poland and Russia, the wars just sweep through and back and forth and back and forth. So who's caught in the middle of this? Jewish people. And this is one of the reasons they become the scapegoat. Now, they're not trusted because, when your economy is falling apart and you're getting invaded every 50 years and it's hard to get going, well, who are you going to blame? You're going to blame people that speak this weird Yiddish, that they don't believe in Christ. They keep to themselves. And so, this is part of why the Jewish people would go into these courts or dynasties, is what they call themselves, these sects, and they hole up and they stay tight and they stay together to survive. And because they're so tight and close together, everyone's threatened by them. And we know historically the horrible pogroms, all that happened. And part of the reason of this is this shatter belt area, this flat plain that you can just sweep right through with these major, huge armies of tens and thousands.
That is so interesting. Because you're right. If you have to start over and over and over, and you're devastated over and over and over, it impacts the entire society.
And I don't know if you've read up, but during World War II, like in these Polish towns, one day the Russians would take it over. And then the next day the Germans would push in. And then 7 days later, the Russians were back in. And then 2 weeks later, it was the Germans. And the people are like, woo, we love you, Russians, don't kill us. Yeah. Oh, yay, Germans. And I mean, and then the war ends, and I killed your brother down the street, and we just threw all the Jewish people in the synagogue and burned them up because they're beyond in survival, like they're in the worst of humanity. And this is because of the shatter belt. It's just these armies are just rolling over them back and forth, and you're just trying to survive.
I did look up and that they do have the Ashkenazi as a group has an average of 115 IQ. The world average is 79.1. So they have the
my goodness.
highest of any ethnic group out
Wow.
there. So the smart people always get blamed for all the problems. That's
That
why
is true
I
too.
blame Rebecca for everything that goes
Oh,
wrong.
thank you. Oh
Well,
my
isn't that
gosh.
fascinating? And they have contributed so much to our world and
Yeah.
society.
That's
And I hope
right.
we just take a pause for that.
Yep.
Because my goodness, what they've gone through, but what they've contributed.
Yep.
You know, this kinds of topics bring out the very best in us and the very worst in humanity.
For such a small group, I don't know that they're any bigger than the Latter-day Saints yet. You've got physics and so many of these different things that are completely come from these Jewish groups, and they're such a small group, but they've contributed so much to the knowledge of the world. It's impressive.
It is impressive. The last I looked a few years back, I think Jewish people in the United States was about 2 to 3 million people. And so kind of similar to active LDS, maybe are 3
real
to 4
numbers.
to 5. Yeah, real numbers, but it's not a large group.
So interesting. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, Hasidic Jews. The term Hasidic is translated from Hebrew, meaning pious ones. I think that really pretty much fits. The pious ones. And this is how it started. So you've got all these Jewish people that have moved into we're going to talk now about the Ashkenazi. Okay, we're not going to talk about the Sephardic anymore. We're going to go to the Ashkenazi. They've moved into Northern Europe, into Russia, and they kind of had a spiritual revival. And it started out of the Western Ukraine and it spread throughout all of Eastern Europe, goes down into Northern Germany, into, gosh, I'm going to forget my places, Romania, Hungary, all of these areas. And what would happen is they really kind of got excited about the Kabbalah, which is mysticism. It's Jewish mysticism. And it draws heavily on this text called the Zohar, which was authored in the late 13th century. And so you'd get a certain man who really, they were like fortune tellers. They felt like they were very pious. They lived very, very, purely. They were revered, and they would read this Kabbalah. And this is where all the numbers come. If you know all about Hebrew and numbers and letters, they really got off on this. And so the people would go to this mystical man, and they revered him so much, he became their rabbi, their Jewish leader. He was the head of and they called them courts or dynasty, and he was in charge. And so the people gathered to these different religious rabbis. They say Rebbe, I think is the Hebrew. We know rabbi. So either work, it's the same person, Rebbe or rabbi. And so like these different dynasties popped up all through Europe. Like one was the Hasid of Belts, and one was the Hasid of Vitsnitz. And then the one we're going to focus on is the Hasid of Satmar. And so it was the people going to these mystics. And you can understand, you guys, it's just been so much war here. So much is going on. I mean, our book club read about Genghis Khan. I mean, all these people are going in and pushing in, and you want some certainty, right? You want some hope. You want to, say, are we going to make it? And they look to this mysticism, this spiritual revival in the late 1700s. And these men were very pious. And this is when you start saying, we're only going to speak the Yiddish. This is where the Yiddish comes out of it. We're going to dress a certain way. We're going to stay pure. We're going to follow all the rules of kosher and do the Shabbat. This is all coming from this revival. Now we can go to the next slide.
This is important because we're doing an episode on the Kabbalah and Zohar and how it inspired Joseph Smith, if you want
He
to
was
say.
working the last couple months of his life with a Kabbalah scholar reading through the
Yes.
Zohar. And when
Yes.
you start going through some of the parallels of his later doctrines of reincarnation and Adam God, more research needs to be done there because it's pretty uncanny and very interesting.
So interesting. Yeah. And it fits the time.
Yeah, it fits
So-
the time. Yeah, see, I didn't realize that, but that was when I looked through your list. I'm like, that exactly fits the time. Yep. Wow.
Mhm. Spiritual revival. It was in Europe. It was here, you know, the second burned over district. It was a time of spiritual revival. So the Satmar Hasidic sect or dynasty. The Satmar is the Hungarian word for Saint Marie. In Yiddish, it's the same word. So you say, how do we get this name Saint Marie for Jewish people? Well, the town that this particular mystic founded this group was in the town of Saint Marie in Transylvania on the border of Hungary and Romania. Now, they lucked out. The Satmars kind of lucked out because, again, all these wars are going on. Everybody's rolling over them. And they kind of migrate and go up into the mountains of Transylvania, and they get left alone. And the princes of Romania and that are like, leave them. You know, they live in their own world. They don't want to be assimilated. They're poor. Leave them be. So they really got to kind of create this. They call themselves dynasties or courts, and they were just in the middle of Transylvania.
The vampires protected him.
Yeah, the vampires did it. And the Rebbe who started the Satmar Hasidic group is Joel Teitelbaum. He was born in 1887, and he is considered a miracle. He is revered because there was a man in the town who realized, you know, he was their follower, their leader, and he hid them during World War I. This rabbi was hidden, this Joel Teitelbaum. So when he made it through the Holocaust, he migrated to New York in 1947, and a huge, large following came with him. So they survived the Holocaust, and we're going to get to the next slide. But for right now, they come to New York. They are going to double down on obedience to all the commandments because they said, if we double down, if we live as righteously as possible, God will not destroy us again in the Holocaust. We were destroyed in the Holocaust because our people assimilated into Europe. Or there was a big group that went to Jerusalem and started Zionism, and God took us out for that. And the other thing that the Satmars really went for was, we're going to repopulate. We're going to have as many kids as we can because that is a revenge on Hitler. And it is still to this day, you guys, not uncommon for these sects to have 10 to 20 children per mother. And they are still, we are going to populate. We are going to come back. We are going to get revenge on Hitler. And it's just kind of fascinating. And then let's go to the next slide, because we'll talk about both ways that people responded in. These are big generalities into the Holocaust, but you absolutely have generational trauma. And so we've talked about the Satmars, the Hasidic groups that said, we're doubling down. We are going to live these commandments as much as possible because God just took us out for assimilating. And for all those Jews that started the state of Israel. And, you know, they started going to Israel in the late 1880s out of Russia from all the pogroms. And the people that survived that are like, adios, you know, we're going to go back to our roots. We're going to go back. We're going to form Israel because, you know, we've been through too much. And so you kind of split with the Holocaust, with the Zionist movement and the Hasidic movement. Also, if you know anything about the Jewish people, you're on a spectrum of the far most conservative would be, I would say, the Satmars within the Hasidic group. There's lots of Hasidic groups. They're all very ultra conservative, but the Satmars probably take the cake for the most conservative. Then you have Orthodox Jews. Then you have Reformed Orthodox Jews. Then you have Reformed Jews. Then you have just liberal Jewish people. Then you have secular Jews. And what happened is everybody kind of came out of the Holocaust. You had a lot of people who went secular, who just said, we're atheists. We don't believe in a God. God wouldn't do this. And you have a lot of people that say, I want to be Jewish. I like that. I'm going to say I'm Jewish, but I'm not going to go do all this eating kosher and doing the Shabbat. And then you have, and like, did anybody watch, what was the show? It was so fun. Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. They were kind of like reformed Jewish. You know, they dressed normal. They had jobs, but boy, they were doing Shabbat. They were in the synagogue. So you can see these different areas you go. But one thing, the sad part, the trauma of this Holocaust is that the Jewish people are united, minus the Hasidics. They say, we don't care what you are. We don't care if you're secular. We don't care if you're reformed. We're coming together. We're Jewish. We're not going to lose each other. And our book clubs read books from Jonathan Haidt, a couple, I think, The Righteous Mind and the Happiness Hypothesis. And he is Jewish. He said he was atheist at 12 or 13, but his family practices these Jewish laws and festivals. They do Shabbat. They do the different festivals because he's going to preserve his Jewishness. He thinks it grounds people. He thinks it brings them happiness. So it's very, very interesting to see how everyone is practicing their Jewish religion. I think it's kind of fun to see it now in the Mormon religion. We've got the Faith Matters group.
Right.
We've got people who are really doubling down. We've got people that are, it is the law, it is the dogma. We've got everybody in between. So all religions kind of do this. We all kind of go on our sphere. And it just, now Jewish people are just very united in that we want to hold on to our identity. We do not want to lose our Jewish identity.
Yeah, we saw that same thing with Sasha Sagan. Carl Sagan was also, from a Jewish background, even though he was secular. So many of the books we've read have been by Jewish authors.
Yeah. Tova Mervis. That was another book about someone leaving the tradition, the faith tradition. Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting.
And of course, Adam Sandler, we can't forget about him.
Oh, Adam Sandler. Yes, exactly.
Oh, we love his song, don't we? Yeah. Well, and I think it's kind of fun, at least in our LDS tradition. I don't know if it's all Christian, but it's the letter of the law, the spirit of the law.
Yep.
And I always say, I'm the spirit of the law. I'm the spirit of the law. And other people, no, it's the letter of the law. You can, again, the dividingness, and we're over here and you're over there. It's just very fascinating.
There's those of us that go to Maverick or used to during Sunday school between, Relief Society, and those that would never dare, and you'd see other people from your ward at Maverick during the break and you'd go, hey, and then you're like, oh, we're these people. Those people are those people. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. I almost see the Satmar Jews as the FLDS. There was.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
The break when they said that you have to end polygamy, that was kind of their Holocaust. And no, we've got to live the law. We must retain the law. We must separate ourselves and live it and protect it and have lots of kids and all of that stuff. And so
and the sacrifice. Yeah. As painful as it is, as terrible it is, we're going to sacrifice. Mm-hmm. We're going to show God how obedient we are. Is right on, Landon.
Wow. That's interesting.
And then the rest of us are like, wow, that's over there.
That's them. That doesn't have anything to do with us.
That's not me. That's woo. Yep. You see them in the groceries, when we drive to Southern California and we're in Mesquite, and it just breaks my heart because there'll always be some of these cute, darling little kids, and the boys are in their suspenders and the girls are and they're just terrified. Yeah. I hate to see a child frightened. So I'm standing about 10 feet away, smiling at him like, it's okay. So they're raised in this extreme fear.
And you're an outsider, so you're someone to be afraid of.
For sure. And
interesting. Wow.
So interesting.
Okay.
Next slide. So this is really just kind of for fun because this shows up in the book and I love the pictures. So again, this dividingness, us against them, who's our enemy. So when Debora Feldman's going to get married and Zoli, her grandfather, is doing the matchmaking, he matchmakes her to her husband. I can't think of his name. I blanked. But he comes in, and Deborah goes to meeting the first day, and her fiance is wearing this flat hat, if you can see it on the screen. And she goes, what's Zadie thinking? He's an Aroni. He's wearing the flat felt hat. Doesn't Zadie know we are the Zollies? So let me explain the succession. So we had the first Joel Titanbaum. He dies. His son takes over. The son is going to die, and now they're in a succession crisis. And half of the Satmar community thinks that the eldest son, Aaron Titanbaum, should be the successor. And they all wear this felt hat to show we're for Aaron. Whereas the Zalman that want the Zollies that want Zalman Titanman, the third son, they wear this big fur hat. So see, you're always signaling. You're always signaling right in their own community who's wearing what. They're bugged by it. And then she starts talking to her fiance, and he says, no, we're neutral. And she has a picture of him in the book wearing both. He's in the flat hat and he's in the fur hat. Now,
it's just like garments, right? Are you wearing your garments? Oh my gosh, he's not wearing his garments. Why would you betroth me? It's exactly like that. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Wow. Or it's just fascinating how we signal and police it. It's just what humans do. It blows my mind. Now, just for fun, because I went down the rabbit hole and watched videos and stuff. See that felt hat that's on the screen?
Yes.
They were talking in the interview, and the guy said his felt hat was $5,000.
Oh.
So maybe I'd want to be in the felt hat group.
I feel like that's cheap compared to
I was going to say
garments
the fur
where
hat.
You get to pay 10%.
Well, that's true too. I was going to say the fur hat looks like it'd be more expensive, but the felt hat is more expensive. How interesting.
No, the fur hat. The fur
hat is more expensive. Okay.
The first hat is $5,000. I'm sure that's mink. I'm sure that's mink.
That's what I was thinking. It would have to be.
Yeah, the felt hat is cheaper and the fur hat is the expensive one. So, you guys, how we show our wealth.
How you show it and your devotion.
And well, we could get into the human hair and the synthetic hair wigs, but we'll see if that shows up.
All those traditions. Wow.
Yeah,
so this is very.
We watched the TV show
Netflix
that's loosely based on the book. It was really interesting because it really showed a lot of the culture of the two groups, and you saw how they do a wedding, and you saw all the felt hats versus the other hats. It was kind of interesting. I had a lot of questions after I watched it, kind of going, what was that all about?
Yeah,
They've got the flyers around the neighborhoods and all of that stuff that's part of their tradition. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we can go to the next. This wasn't a super big deal, but I just found it fascinating, again, dividing in us versus them. So let's kind of get into the book now. And the thesis that I kind of came up with as I studied this is that it is the author, Debora Feldman, freeing herself from her religious systems of control, while the Satmars are untethered from reality and shackled in shame and secrecy. So for those of you who are just listening, you have to realize that these Hasidic groups, not just the Satmars, but most of them, they do not have TVs. They do not have radios. Now, I thought it was interesting in some of the YouTubes I was watching now. The other Hasidics, they're pulling out phones, they're pulling out computers. But the Satmars, none of it. None of it. And when 9/11 happened, and they're looking up and seeing all the smoke, you have to realize they're just over the bridge in Brooklyn. And the Twin Towers are right there on the end of the island. Finally, Zadie sits there and he gets nervous and he leaves their area and he comes back with a radio. And they turn on the radio and they're just listening and listening and listening. And Bubby says, well, it's the Holocaust again. See, this is what happens. We're not living the lives. So this is how isolated they are.
Yeah.
And so when we say they're untethered from reality, that's how they reacted to 9/11. It's just like, well, this is what happens.
Here it goes.
And
in the book, Zadie is the grandpa and Bubby is the grandma raising the author, Debora, in this tradition. So, but with nothing, with nothing.
And they've got money, but you don't spend a dime. You've got to be pious. You've got to show God that you can sacrifice. And the shame, we'll get into the shame, but the levels of shame are so sad. And they just, They don't want anybody to know who they are. You don't talk about problems. You don't discuss problems. Everybody just follow the rules.
Familiar.
Yeah, follow the rules. Don't question. I mean, it's all really kind of there.
Yeah, like I said, as we read this, we're like, oh my goodness, the parallels. But again, even within Mormonism, like I was raised in a very Orthodox way, and we'll talk about that later. We're going to take a little quiz, but others weren't. Others could do all kinds of things. And, so there's a spectrum within any religion, religious, faith tradition of, what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. It's very different.
And for Mormonism, I think, and we'll talk about this in the quiz, it goes to our family of origins.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that has the most profound effect on us is our family of origin in terms of how we grew up in the Mormon community, how we saw things, how we lived things. It's just fascinating to put the parallels together.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay.
All right. Oh, here we go. Just what we were talking about. The quiz, the How Mormon Were You quiz.
and yes, and we're going to take this fun quiz and let me set it up because we've been setting this up all along. We've got the extreme Satmars to secular, and we've talked about how, we had the FLDS all the way to Faith Matters group that are focused more on Jesus. There's such a continuum of how we live our Mormon religion. And so we took this quiz in the book club. For those of you who are listening, just kind of take the quiz in your mind. The three of us will say how yes or no, how we were raised. And what we need to know is we're going to say, how Mormon are you? And what I want you to do is when we answer these questions, we're excluding holidays and vacations.
Right,
because
in general behavior.
Yeah, this is your general average. This is what we do on Sundays, and this is how we live our lives. So exclude vacations, holidays, and let's go into how Mormon were you? And I say were because I'm saying how you grew up.
Right.
That's why we've got the past tense there. And then if you guys, one of you will read it, and then we'll all just, we can say yes, no, and go through it.
Yeah, I can read it. It's great. So, and I have to say, excluding vacations and holidays in my family, no different. Always found a ward to go to, could not go to a store, could not eat, even on a vacation. So some of us are, the pendulum's way over here. So, all right. Number one, excluding vacations and holidays, were you allowed to eat out on Sunday? For me, never, not once in my entire childhood, never.
Boy, I would say no for me too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a no.
Yep. That's on Sunday. See, so that's pretty Orthodox right there. Just the three of us.
Yeah.
I'm so curious in the chat what you guys are going to answer because I know there is this whole spectrum. Number two, excluding vacations and holidays, were you ever allowed to swim on Sunday? For me, absolutely not.
I was a no.
Yep, never went swimming on Sundays.
Well, so far we're pretty Orthodox. Number three, were you or females in your family allowed to wear a bikini? Absolutely not. I was dressed garment ready from being a baby, not even a tank top.
I was a no on bikinis, but I could wear sleeveless. I wore short shorts.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised in that era that wasn't immodest. You just had to change how you dressed when you went through the temple. It had nothing to do with this modesty culture that like Dr. Julie Hanks is just working so hard to get rid of. We were that way. We could wear the short shorts. I could wear a sleeveless dress to church and not even miss a beat. But the bikinis, we drew the line on the bikini.
Yep. Landon, did you wear a bikini?
The females in my family could not wear a bikini, but I was allowed to. So I don't know where you put that.
We're learning way too much. That's really funny. So,
but I will say, growing up, and I'm in the Salt Lake area, which is different than like Utah County. Lots of girls wore bikinis, and we'd have a super activity. The youth would go for 3 days. Plenty of girls wore bikinis on that.
Really?
So the bikini wasn't that big of a deal. They weren't embarrassed.
In the 70s.
So you had a ward party at the pool or you went water skiing. Half had bikinis on, half didn't. There wasn't that much shaming. I felt like I was raised pretty healthy from my own family, from from my ward and stake. Those things just weren't that big a deal.
It was right when I became a teenager that they made the girls wear the shirts over everything.
Yeah, in the
and
late
then the
80s.
one piece.
Yeah.
I was robbed of that in my teen years.
Well, see, what am I? I'm almost 62. So we were still we're fine. It's good.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
so
I think there was a big change from the late 70s, even early 80s to then the late 80s. I think that's where the change was. I think there was. So, all right, number 4, were you or your family allowed to watch R-rated movies? Not at all. Not one bit.
once in a while, if there was maybe it was the swear word that made it.
Yeah.
So we weren't hardlined. We could look into it and say, you know what, this one we could do. And so we were more lax on our movies, but my father loved movies. So it was great. We grew up on a lot of movies. Happy times.
We were not allowed to have R-rated movies in our house. However, the neighbor was, so I watched many movies at the neighbor's house, but not at my house.
Normally how it goes.
Yep.
Well, I don't know if you guys know, but and I can't remember the name of it, but in Salt Lake, there was see, I'm back with the dinosaurs. There was this video store, and they pulled out all, and they got somehow permission. They pulled out all the bad swear words and all the nudity scenes, and you could watch these R-rated shows like PG fashion. And my one friend's mother,
it was like called
it was
Angel
pre-Angel Studio. I can't remember what it was, but you could buy the stick, and that was supposed to do it too. Yeah.
And I mean, I tell you, my one friend, her mother would come from California. She's like, "Oh, bring them on! I can finally watch all these shows I want to watch." So, it was kind of, it's funny how we adapt and work through it, and so we don't miss out. Probably pretty healthy. We should probably be seeing the movies of our culture, but I remember that part.
Yeah, and then it was illegal because you're destroying someone's work, right? And you're changing it. So then all that went away. Okay, number 5, were you or your family allowed to use playing cards? 100% no. I've never seen my sister, I have one sister, younger, get in trouble more than when my parents discovered a deck of cards that a friend had given her under her pillow. You'd have thought they would have caught her, I don't know, in prostitution. I mean, she, we were not even allowed to play Rook or Uno, any card that had a number on it. We couldn't do it.
Wow.
Those were like gateway cards. So yeah, it was pretty serious stuff. I was definitely at a deficit when I went to BYU, because there I have roommates that are all like, let's play cards, let's play. I had no idea. I was very behind the 8 ball on all that. I didn't know. So
I was for sure playing cards, and we used them nonstop, had a wonderful time. It's a wonderful part of my family history. And my dad even taught us how to play poker, and we bet with matchsticks.
Oh my gosh.
So, we just had a good time with it. It wasn't seen as silly. I had friends who used rook cards who played the same games I played with rook cards. And I kept thinking, what's the difference? Why is this
What's
queen?
the difference? Yeah.
For what I heard, it was the queen and the king. What are they called? The face cards that were like, ooh, that could be the evil part with the
gambling.
Face cards.
For me, they said gambling, the root of all evil, the complete downfall of society.
And I think I just got good at my times tables and adding and addition growing up, playing all those great card games. So that was not a big deal in our family. That's great. It was happy times for us to play some fun card games. Still is. Just really a part of our family culture.
Yeah, I missed out.
We could do Uno and Rook, but we couldn't have the decks with the face cards. Actual playing cards we couldn't do.
Yep. And that was kind of a big thing. They mentioned that in conference and stuff like that. There were talks about it in that era. It was a big deal. You never hear anything like that anymore, but back then you really did. So, all right. Number 6, were you or your family allowed to use swear words? No, and hell no, not at all. No swear words.
Well, my sweet mom and dad did hell and damn, but they told us we weren't allowed. So it was, again, pretty healthy. I have to say, I think I came from a really healthy background. It never got beyond that, but, kind of normal. So they weren't scary. I didn't feel like, you just knew you had to be an adult before you could use those words.
Yep.
We weren't encouraged to use swear words. we could say damn jokes whenever we crossed a dam in the car. You were unleashed at that moment.
Right.
Dad used to, he'd always tell me when I'd get in trouble, he'd say, your ass is grass and I'm the lawnmower. So I remember him saying that to me.
He said the word ass.
Ass,
Okay.
yeah. So, but typically, no swear words out of anyone. Just, dad might once in a while. But if we said it, I remember the soap in the mouth as a kid. It was real.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
You were like a Christmas story.
Yep.
So isn't that funny? No, my parents were so, oh my gosh. When I was it must have been like 1980 or so, there was a series on TV called The Bastard. It was based on a famous novel, The Bastard. I never knew it was called that. My mom wanted to watch it, but she told me it was called The Mustard. So that's what I thought it was. It was like a multiple night series. And of course, I went to school and said, has anyone seen The Mustard? Yeah, I was that kid, right? And they're all like, wah, 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 wah. It was that kind of a thing. So yeah, she was always replacing words. I've told this before about West Side Story and the Jets. When you're a Jet, you're for the rest of your life from your first cigarette. Yeah, I couldn't say the word cigarette. My mom told me it was vinaigrette. So again, I'm that kid singing the song in college. Or like vinaigrette. Yeah, I was terrified of salad dressing for years. I could not say the word cigarette. So I know there's probably some songs right now that if I were to sing, I'd have the wrong word. You'll have to let me know.
Oh, that's
again,
great.
your family of origin, right? That's what happens. Were you or your family allowed to watch TV on Sunday? This is
absolutely.
Yeah, you got to do it all day.
Well, back when the dinosaurs roamed, when I was there was only football games on. Yeah. There was what was the kingdom? The
Wild Kingdom.
Wild Kingdom.
Mutual of Omaha. Yep.
Mutual
of Omaha. So
people.
Bored out of my mind, just like could something come on TV so I could watch anything, but it was about the boringest day of TV of the week. And until Sunday night when the Sunday night movie of the week came on, and then we were there.
Yeah,
streets
and funny, and we just remember it because there's like 3 channels. I mean, I was raised without TV, but my parents would rent a TV for general conference and at Christmas time. So a couple times a year, we would have a TV in the home, and when that happened, it was Sundays, not at all during the day, but like you just said, Mutual of Omaha and Disney. It was just like magic because we didn't have TV. Finally, my grandparents went on a mission when I was 14, and they said, we are leaving you our TV because your kids are growing up weird. And so then I got a TV. I watched it nonstop for years. And that's how I developed everything I know about pop culture, which is everything. But yeah, it was a big deal to be able to watch on Sunday night. What about your family, Landon?
We had 4 boys and 2 girls, so football was a standard. But I remember early on the debates of whether we could or couldn't. But by the last kids, it was on Sunday was football. Whatever. And we were all fighting with each other by the end of the night, based on who your team was. But definitely Sunday night, Mutual of Omaha, Wild Kingdom, and Disney. Disney's Wild, whatever it was, they'd have
Wonderful World of Disney. Something different every time. Yeah.
2-hour, I think it was, show. So that was
fun.
Definitely we did that.
Everyone of our age has that memory. I mean, it was just there was nothing else on. There was 3 channels. That was it. Okay, were you or your family allowed to change out of church clothes on Sunday? To me, this is the huge indicator of how Orthodox your family was. I was not until bedtime. Church clothes from the morning to the night. Yeah,
absolutely. And my mom was as much of these are nice clothes, put them up.
Yeah,
we're going to keep them nice. And we were cold, and we could put on whatever we wanted once church was done. We could be comfortable and lounge and enjoy.
It's awesome.
Yep, we could change out as soon as we got home. So.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I mean, that really shows orthodoxy, to stay in those church clothes all day long, especially for little kids. It's really hard. Yeah.
And I'm going to throw one in, which I wished we had. How many of you had to fast 24 hours?
Yep, that was me too. That I think is the other indicator of orthodoxy. I remember.
I was a no.
Yeah, see? And you probably know also, Landon. Yeah, I remember stomach aches, headaches.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Pain, suffering. I would just crawl into bed and I would just read a book. I would read a cookbook quite often, but just pounding, throbbing headache from hunger. And I will say that is the first rule I ever broke when I was 16, one Sunday. My head was splitting. We also didn't take aspirin or anything like that in my home. I didn't have an aspirin until I went to college. And one of my roommates goes, here, take this. I'm like, anyway, so my head's splitting, pounding. I can't even think straight. My vision is blurring. I'm so hungry. And I'm like, you know what? This is ridiculous. And I snuck downstairs to our kitchen. Everybody else was kind of in their rooms reading or asleep. And I got a piece of bread out of the bread drawer. And I remember sneaking it upstairs, wolfing it down. And I'm like, nothing happened. And I'm not kidding. It broke my brain open that maybe all of this was for nothing and the rules didn't mean anything. And after that, I regularly would go and eat on on fast Sundays, because it was torture.
I'm so sorry. We were we just woke up in the morning. So, we'd pound food until we went to bed at night because it was fast Sunday. We prayed for the early sacrament meeting. So if we were done at 1, we were done. And my mom was wonderful. If we said, I feel sick, I have a stomach ache, we could eat. She was fine saying, maybe you need a little drink of water. It was never crazy.
Yeah.
So it was, again, done pretty healthy, in a pretty healthy way.
Yeah, I think so, Jacki.
Yeah, we skipped 2 meals. So you could eat at, Saturday night and then breakfast and lunch, but we'd eat an early dinner. So it'd be at like 2 or 3. So it was kind of like that. But you learned the secrets. Like, if I wake up before everyone else and go get a bowl of cereal, I can claim I forgot it was fast Sunday and I will have eaten and it'll be too late. And once you've broken the fast, well, now there's no reason to not eat lunch. So
yeah. What's interesting is that fasting, to me, I never understood what it was supposed to be for or what the benefit. All I knew is that it was debilitatingly painful with headaches and blurred vision and stomach aches. My parents never really explained, oh, this is for this or this is why you're doing it. Somehow that was lost on me. I didn't know. I just knew I had to suffer through it until I could finally eat. So I don't know.
No,
Which is probably why I didn't make my kids fast at all. I'm like, nope, nobody's doing that.
Oh, how nice.
Yep.
We started much later. I started 8 kind of. I didn't start my kids till 10 or 11, and I'd let them cave. If somebody had a headache, they ate. Yeah, for sure. And I did know what stayed with me as a child was this is to help poor people. Yeah. So that would help me when I was younger. Oh, they would give the money to help poor people. And I knew it was to help you come closer to God. So I knew to fast for good reasons. Bring you closer to God, not you're going to get in trouble, not that he's going to withdraw some blessing. It was the healthy way to do it.
Yep, I agree. All right. Did you attend all youth activities? Yes, I did. Could never get out of that ever.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Our family was you show up, if there's a church activity, you go.
Yep. In your family, did men participate in scouting? I didn't have brothers, but the kids I raised, yes, had to be in scouting. Landon, I know the answer from you.
Yeah. Four brothers, all Eagles, and my sons are all Eagles, except for one got 1 merit badge short, and that's when we left the church, and he said, I'm not finishing.
And Landon was a scoutmaster for decades, weren't you? You were that marching them up, follow me, boys, up to the top of the mountain. That was you.
Oh, my. Well, again, talking about this orthodoxy and where things started moving. My brother, they all did scouting, but it just wasn't a big deal if you got the eagle or you didn't get the eagle. And my mom wanted my brother to be an Eagle Scout, and she bribed him with some great thing. If you finish it, you get this. And he did. And he was the only one of his friends that did. And so, it's kind of interesting how you do it. But I don't know if you remember, it's when I was raising my boys was it President Benson who said everybody needs to be an Eagle Scout, have their duty to God. And then scouting, I think, kind of went down the tube. It was watered down and dumbed down because you had to get every kid through, whether that boy wanted to do it or not. He was in that queue, and it was find the easiest Eagle project. Pass them off because, you had to have that checklist now. Eagle Scout, duty to God, return missionary. And it just kind of, I saw it lost the meaning of what scouting was meant to be to checklist this thing.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And you see scouts that are like 12 years old getting their eagle, and their mom did every single thing on the list, right? You're 12.
That's not true. You had to be 13 to get it.
Okay, 13, whatever. The youngest
and I got
level.
mine on my 13th birthday, and I did it all myself.
Well, you're
Oh,
you.
wow,
I was
Landon.
very motivated. Yeah.
You were
That
very
is great.
motivated. Yeah.
You loved it.
But I do remember I got a couple times when I went for merit badges, I got sent back and they said, no, you haven't met this requirement yet.
Well, that would never happen later.
Never happen nowadays.
No,
Yeah.
they just
Never
let anybody.
You go to these classes, and in 2 hours you had 5 merit badges, so.
Yeah, and now there's no more
you
scouting.
go to the camps and they'd knock out 10 or 11,
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's all over. It's gone, never to be again. Okay, did you or your family drink Coke or Pepsi? Absolutely not. And one time I went to a tea party when I was like 4, and they were pouring something. I thought it was prune juice, because that's what we had at our house. Yeah, we had prune juice.
No.
And I will never forget this feeling, because I also didn't have carbonation, just prune juice. And I lifted this little teacup up to, and I tasted the carbonation and the bubbly and the caffeine and the Pepsi. It was Pepsi. And I went, oh my gosh, it was amazing, but I knew. So I went home and I confessed to my mom, and she helped me go through the repentance process. It took a couple days.
Well, if you just drank prune juice, you were a regular child.
Oh, thank you. I'm probably revealing too much. No one will give me any credibility after this.
Excuse me. No, we could drink Coke. Coke or Pepsi wasn't an issue. We were get the caffeine cold, not hot. My parents had Postum growing up. It wasn't coffee, but they liked a hot drink like that. They didn't want all the calories in the hot cocoa. So really very, very normative. Now I'll tell you a funny story is, I never liked Coke as a child because my mother gave me a Coke if you had the stomach flu. Oh. So I associated Coke with the stomach flu, didn't want to touch it. So I was a root beer Sprite girl. And then I started breaking out when I was in junior high and high school. So I was vain and I dropped all carbonated drinks. And then, if you can believe it, I never touched even a sugar-free drink till I was we were about 52, and we took the whole family to Spain. And if in Europe, it's more expensive to buy water than it is a Diet Coke. And so I said, well, this is ridiculous. I can get the Coke for $1 and the bottled water's $2. I popped that Diet Coke, or they poured it. I took one drink and said, where have I been? What was I thinking? And my husband is still mad at me to this day. He said, you were off it. You were a purist. You were into your 50s, and you took up this filthy habit, this crappy stuff.
Never too late. That's right. And now they're swig.
Oh, Coke is with me at all times.
Yeah, I know. I love Diet Coke too. It's a problem. Landon, what about it? Did you guys have soda at your house?
Yeah, as long as we didn't drink alcohol or coffee, we were good. We could drink anything else.
Yeah, we were the same way. Yeah.
Funny? So, and no one had prune juice. There you go. So the very last question was, and I know there's lots more questions, that can show you orthodoxy. And I'm sure in the chat, you guys can think of ones. Did your parents attend the temple regularly? And mine did, although, when I was growing up, there weren't very many, but whenever we went on a vacation, like a road trip, my parents would stop in cities where there were temples. And back then in the 70s, they had a program where you would just call someone in the stake who was the temple coordinator, and they would arrange for a family to babysit your kids all day while you went to the temple. So I have terrifying memories. I was the oldest. My sister was younger, of being dropped off at complete stranger's house. Have no idea. I knew my parents were going to the temple. I didn't know where that was. I didn't even know where I was, and just thinking I have to protect my sister. I mean, the families were lovely. They were fine. They were LDS families, thank God they were fine and lovely. Can you imagine who might sign up for that kind of a thing? But, my first memories of anything to do with temple is it's secret. Your parents go away. And I'm terrified the whole time because I don't know if they're coming back. Isn't that interesting? Crazy. I don't know if anyone else in the chat ever, used any of those programs, but it was for people that were traveling. You could call someone in a stake where a temple was, and they would set you up with a babysitter.
Wow.
Yeah.
My parents went monthly. Back then, when I was growing up, you just went once a month. Wasn't weekly. And so they did. And, you just knew that they had them in like little briefcases, and that was mom and dad were going to the temple, and it just gave me curiosity. I was excited when I could finally go, because I was the youngest in the family, and everybody was going but me, and my brother and sister are getting married, and I'm sitting outside the temple. So I was like, when it was me, it's like, finally, finally.
You had happy memories about it, looking forward to it. I think it hasn't even been until recently that I've realized, I wonder if I've always been terrified of the temple, before I went, the secret, all that. And I wonder if it wasn't because of those that trauma. I've always just associated with really scary, frightening, fight or flight kind of feelings. So what about you, Landon? Did your parents go? Because both you guys were in Utah. So you had more access to the temple, still being at home and being able to go.
Yeah, they went every month. It was where they would call and ask you if you went that month.
Yeah,
you had to report it. So they went. My mom she goes twice, 3 times a week. I don't know. She's a temple worker now for the last 10, 15 years. I don't know. So
isn't that funny that they used to call you? When I first got married and moved into my first married ward, I get this phone call, and she's like, "Oh, I'm just calling to check on your temple attendance." And I'm like, my what? Because I hated the temple right out of the gate. And so I lied. I'm like, oh, I tried to make up a number that seemed like it would be good. I go, I went 5 times. She goes, oh, honey, you'll do better next month, but I'll write down 5 this time. And I'm like, oh my God. So yes, I lie about going to the temple. Everybody knows now I'm a terrible person.
Smart enough to do it.
I don't think to do it. That's right. I had to make some lie.
I would have just gone 0.
Yeah, 0. No, I always people pleaser. Got to tell them what I think they want to hear, but it wasn't enough. All right. That was really interesting. I hope we had fun in the chat going over that too. And we're going to compare that now just to, the range of how even just the 3 of us were raised, although we were all Mormons and our families were all active LDS. There's a huge difference just between the 3 of us.
It's fascinating. Now, I'm going to give the backstory on this part of the presentation. This book is called Against Religion, written by Thomas Pataki. So a few years ago, as I'm deconstructing everything and I'm inquisitive and trying to figure it all out, I sat there and I'd been hearing this high demand fundamentalist religion. I was like, what? And so I just Googled what are the characteristics of a fundamentalist religion? I just kind of started researching a little bit, and a review of this book came up. And so I read through the review quickly, and this professor, who is a professor of philosophy at the University of Melbourne, he studied extreme fundamentalist groups coming out of Christians, Hindus, Sikhs, the Buddhists, Judaic, Islam. He never touched Mormonism. We're far too small to even whether he decided should it be one or not. It doesn't show up. So this is just a regular study of the basic religions that come out of our world religions. And we'll go into the 10. It just fascinated me when we come up to him. But his overall, what he found is that extreme religions stem from the same roots of fear, misery, and delusion, and also very narcissistic. So when I read these 10 characteristics, I just kind of went, oh my gosh, I was raised in a fundamentalist religion. Because you can see how we answered these questions. I'm far more normal, healthy. We kind of do it. It's no big deal. So again, it was those polygamists, not me. And I'm reading them and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I think it took me 3 to 6 months. I kept going to my husband. I was raised in a fundamentalist religion. This is a fundamentalist religion. I'm in a fundamentalist religion. So it just kind of really stuck with me. So when I read the book Unorthodox, this book review was in my mind. I pulled it up, and this is where I pulled it all together, because I'm like, so we're going to look at the extremes of this extreme Satmar Orthodox religion. Of course, Mormonism is not anywhere near this. You said it best, Landon. That's the FLDS. But let's look at the tenets as we go through them, and those who are listening and all of us, we can decide, does this fit the LDS religion? Does it not? And I think in some ways it's interesting because when you're just kind of barely fitting in it isn't that harmful. There's a lot of this that if it's done in moderation, it's not harmful. It brings you together. It's a ritual. It like I said, my parents taught me that when you fasted, it was to help poor people. There's nothing wrong with that. That's healthy. So have this in mind as we go through them, and you decide for yourself, if you're listening, do you think our religion, this Mormon religion, fits these 10 characteristics? And we can talk about it and decide what we think. So can somebody else read these so it's not just me talking?
Yeah, I'll read them.
Oh, let's see. Wait. Oh, let me talk for a little bit before we get to them.
Okay.
Sorry, I was going to say, let's have Landon do it, but I was muted. So,
yeah, here we go. I just don't think they're numbered. So let's
they're
do
not
the
numbered,
first
but
one,
there's
Landon.
5 on each page and they're in order. So,
Okay. So Landon, take it away.
Okay. Counter-modernist identity rooted in past golden age, restore the golden past.
Okay.
We're a restorationist church. So yes, there it is.
Kind of hard to argue that one.
Yep.
Assertive, clamorous.
Wait, let me just.
Oh, okay.
Let me go on. It's interesting with the far right Mormon and Christian groups. The golden past is the 1950s, and it's the founding fathers.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's the golden past. That's what's always coming up. And the founding fathers, and they were gonna, religion, and we're gonna go back to this idyllic 1950s when the woman stays at home. So that's where you can see this golden age popping up in our Mormon Christian sects that fall into this. Okay, next one.
Assertive, clamorous, and often violent. There might be a reason they were chased out of 1, 2, 3 different locations, and then often violent. You think of the Mountain Meadows massacre and the violence that was done under Brigham Young. So,
Missouri War.
Definitely in the past.
Definitely in the past. And I would say you could maybe use the assertive with missionary work.
Yeah. Or temple building, as we've seen. They go into these towns and they say, God told us and you can't change it. And we're putting it there and we'll sue you if you don't. So, very assertive. The chosen, the elect, the saved, burdened with a special mission on behalf of deity to benefit the world, so superior.
Yeah.
So you're a superior person because you've been chosen. You're special. This is where the narcissism comes in.
Yeah.
And, we've got to save the dad, right? The work of the dad.
We've
got to do this temple work. We're the restorationist church. This has been restored. We've got to, bring this back.
You were saved for the latter days and you are a saint.
So
that,
literally a saint. That takes a lot of nerve.
Mm-hmm.
Marks of distinction, superiority, identity, part of the narcissistic struggle of being special, skull caps, turbans, hijab, crosses, circumcision, initiations, baptism, food taboos, holy times create separateness from evil outside the world.
So we have our food taboos. We have our food taboos. Can't drink coffee. We wear our garments under, but distinct clothing. Certainly our initiations, and these are beautiful. A temple naming a baby. I think we all have our second thoughts on children being baptized at 8 now, but we do have these initiation rites for sure, and I think every religion does. It's just how extreme we go with them.
Well, just stop
think about
practicing.
the most. Oh, go ahead, Landon.
I was going to say, just stop practicing and you'll realize how many things your family does that you're now not invited to because
that's true.
You don't follow those rituals anymore.
And I think you could say for certain, a mission is a rite of passage. Just, boom.
100%. And I would say most recently, the distinction is, you guys are Mormon. We are not Mormon. We are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter. I mean, nothing sets you apart more than that. You have to say that in public, say that in front of people. And they're like, okay, happens all the time. We get comments all the time about how we use the word Mormon and people are always trying to set us straight. They're very distinct, very special.
And I mean, I use it I'm using it here like crazy because I see it as a cultural term.
That's
for
how
me,
I
it's
see it too.
strictly cultural.
Yep.
So
Me
we're
too.
kind of in this academic discussion. So I'm just going straight to Mormon because that's where we are.
I know, me too.
One true religion and one correct way of life must defend from inroads from other religions and secularism, always under persecution and threat. You are either all in or all out, no middle ground.
Our enemies, right? What other churches talk constantly about our enemies?
Yeah, I don't
think, Well, in the Christian religion, it's the atheists. It's the godless atheists.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where we are in our country. It's the godless atheists. They're the enemy. We've got to defend secularism in the schools. That's why you're either homeschooling or, you're trying to get the Bible like in Oklahoma in the mainstream. It's all there. And I can still hear President Hinckley say the Book of Mormon, it's either the truth or it's the greatest fraud
fraud.
And we're like, that is such a black and a white statement, but this is part of these characteristics, very black and white, all or nothing. Whereas I think about the progressive side of our religion, the faith matters, it's so gray and it's so loving and it's so focused on Jesus. And my personal bias is I see it so healthy. It's such a healthy way.
It's much better for sure. Yeah, the other one is fear mongering. We're at war. You're special. You're chosen. You got to watch out. The second coming rhetoric. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Next slide.
There we go.
Inerrant holy book, charismatic leader, literal obedience, mandatory Vedas.
Okay, so then, sorry, I was going to kind of read these, so I didn't make complete sentences. The holy books in world religions are the Vedas, which are Hindu. Torah, Jewish, Bible, Christian, Quran, Muslim, and I put in parentheses Book of Mormon because, again, this professor who wrote the book did not look at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but that's our holy book.
Yeah.
We've got one.
Absolutely.
And we have a charismatic leader, Joseph Smith.
Law and authority come from God, a theocracy. Yeah, there's no question on that.
This list is terrifying.
Yeah.
It's so
I don't know if you ever read D. Michael Quinn's Extensions of Power and Origins of Power. I mean, I just went empire building, It was truly a theocracy. What was Brigham Young? He was the governor. He was over Indian affairs. He was the prophet. Just like these rabbis, there's no difference.
He was the military commander. Yeah. He had all authority in one. And still today, you look at, the prophet said we have to do it. We have to do it. Doesn't matter what the civil codes are or anything like that. We get to ignore them. Because God told us to, and they believe their belief overrides any civic law. Female sexuality, clear boundaries between men and women, controlled by patriarchy, women, subordinate, polluted, taboo, sexual practices linked with homophobia. Finally, one that doesn't fall within the...
Well, and in the book, when they talk about, and we've all seen this in Jewish practices, the men at the wedding are dancing on one side, the women are another. I'm like, where else in the world? I mean, like the United States, do they do that? The Mormon temple, right? Men on one side, women on the other, same kind of thing. Boundaries.
And the women used to veil their faces.
Yep. That was my era.
Again, we go back to this. Humans do this, don't we? We create these boundaries. We police. We've got to show these outward ways that we're in the in group. It never ceases to fascinate me.
No, it doesn't. And I brought up at book club how I've seen on faithful social media, women bringing up the idea of a head covering for LDS women. They've said to be more modest, and to be more respectful of Heavenly Father. Why has anybody thought about starting to wear head coverings? I've been doing it, they're saying. And some of the women on social media are like, oh, I don't know. And others are like, oh, I like that. Much more pious and faithful. So you're always going to invent a next level where you're doing something different, to set yourself apart.
Yeah.
Sure.
And we got into a discussion with our book club, which we talked about the Mormon one-upping.
Yeah.
So like I knew people who wouldn't date people that drank Diet Coke, or we can't eat cocoa, we can't eat chocolate because there's caffeine in chocolate. These extremes. We're going to take it further. You guys may do that, but it's just amazing what we do behaviorally. Okay, Landon.
Sexual behavior is a major concern. No masturbation, homophobic, no sex before marriage.
There's that pamphlet to young men only. They're obsessed with that. They're obsessed.
And then fundamentalism and nationalism converge. Government that will prioritize right morals and right culture for the nation.
Wow.
And of course, those right morals and right culture always line exactly with their church.
Are yours. That's right. Boy, this list is really scary, Jacki. I can't, but this is so so accurate.
And it's so amazing because this is somebody who just went out and did the studies, did the data. This is what rose up, and didn't study our religion, yet you go, wow.
Yeah.
And now I want to premise right here. One of the things why I wanted to talk about this is for those who are on the inside, still attending church, Mormonish, I'm glad we made aware these 10 characteristics, because when you're aware of them, you can say, oh, okay, that's not healthy. I'm going to back away from that. I think this is one way we can help the church move forward in a more healthy way. Let's not get so uptight about you've got it. You can't, we see people, we're going to drink coffee now. We like green tea. Green tea's healthy. This is some ways where you can say, maybe I want to do more of the spirit of the law than the letter of the law. If we're aware of these extremes, we can be the moderating force, maybe, to say, oh, let's back off. God is a God of love, and we have grace, and let's support each other. So when you know better, when you know better, you do better. Let's take a look at these 10 slides and say, I think we all care about this religion. We all have friends and family in it. Let's be aware of this, and how can we turn the tide for healthy ways?
I love that. I love that perspective. You're right. Just stop from going overboard into that dangerous orthodoxy area, and just, really have personal revelation about what's best for you, what's best for your family in a healthy way, I think is what we're talking about.
Yeah, that is absolutely the premise that comes out of this for me, and why I wanted to discuss it. How can we make things healthier?
Yep.
We can be part of the solution.
Well, if you're a member of the church reading this list, you certainly can't say that you can't say it doesn't meet any of these. The church clearly meets all of these.
To one degree, yes.
Then you go back and you say, well, I can't argue with that. So I'm going to have to say, well, what's wrong with orthodoxy? What's wrong with following the God, and what's wrong with following the commandments? And that's going to be the argument, because you can't not see these in your church. You just can't.
Well, I think the Faith Matters people kind of do it.
Yeah.
They kind of go, you know what, that was older. We're gonna leave that in the past. We're gonna move it forward. We're gonna relax. We're gonna be part of this group that says, let's not focus on that. I think they really are trying to do it. I mean, my personal biases, head for Faith Matters, like head for that group, head for the progressive group, head for the group that's about love and more service, and how can we be like that Jesus who, we learned the parables about.
Right.
But it's a real thing. And I mean, we've talked about it before. There's kind of a civil war within Mormonism. Again, we divide each other, right? We've got the group that this are the laws. You can't change them. This is the way it's always been. We've got the group that says, and we're watching it. We're watching it play out.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it centers around treatment and policies on LGBTQ issues.
For sure.
Half the church is like, and we saw that with the Aaron Sherinian, a spokesman, who was chosen by the church, but he was an ally, and then he was never allowed to be the spokesman after that came out. It's so no one knows what to think. You've got the Orthodox that say, nope, God's spoken. You've got the Restore Mormons saying, no, love everyone. So I don't know. There's a middle ground. It's also roulette. That's a problem too. But I agree. Err on the side of love and peace, a little bit more. Maybe I'm a hippie. I don't know.
I know. I mean, I've changed and I'm like, I think I want to be a hippie, just love everybody. And so, I'm a church watcher, I'm a Kremlin watcher. Thank you, John Hamer, and I'm always checking it out. And, I can't tell you who's going to win, but I know what side I'm voting for.
Yep.
And hoping comes.
That's true.
Okay. So as we go into this book, there's no question it was kind of divided into two parts: the chains that bind and the path that sets you free. And so we can just move on. These are some beautiful quotes that come out of the book. This author is such a beautiful writer. And probably the hardest thing I had to do in doing this presentation was cutting out quotes. I mean, I just wanted to put 10 times as many in, but I kind of went through. And so we're going to focus in on the chains that bind. We're going to look at these Satmar rules. We're going to look at patriarchy, and we're going to look at how the family controls all this with their rules and policing. And so here's some quotes that kind of fit with these dogmatic, follow these rules. This is the way it goes. There's no wiggle room. You do it. And then will one of you guys please read?
Yeah, I can read that. And I think very quickly before I read it, I'll just super quickly give just a slight rundown of the book in like 30 seconds as we discussed. Debora Feldman, raised by her grandma and grandpa in this community. Parents, a mother had left and a father had mental health issues. So married very young to someone, that was arranged. And as a newly married person, had a lot of problems with sexual dysfunction just because of no education, so huge trauma around that, not being able to fulfill the things that they were supposed to, do as a couple and have children, and just became increasingly dissatisfied. And as a child, she'd been allowed to read. So I think in her mind, she was much freer than her circumstances, that she found herself in. And so, just as you reach that pinnacle of marriage, I think that you're supposed to, and she's only like 18 when it's happening. And then it's not what she thinks, and it's trauma, and it's depression, and it's anxiety, and it's the medication. And then eventually you just start thinking, I need to find a way to be free, does have a child, but then thinks I need to try to find a way to free my child too. So it's that story. And that's why all these quotes are so good. Just if anyone finds themselves in a system where they don't fit, and they, if they're honest, don't want to be, that's why all of these things, are so relatable to a lot of us. So one of the chains that binds, here we go. In our community, markers of piety are very important. It is imperative that we appear at all times to be pious, to be true agents of God. Appearances are everything. They have the power to affect who we are on the inside, but also they tell the world that we are different, that they must keep away. I think much of the reason Satmar Hasidim dress in such a specific, conspicuous manner is so both the insiders and the outsiders will remember the vast chasm that lies between our two worlds. Assimilation, my teacher always says, was the reason for the Holocaust. We try to blend in, and God punishes us for betraying him.
Boom. I mean, there it is.
Yep.
Now, if we can go to the next page. So through reading the book, these are some of the chains that bind, these rules, these strict rules that Debora and all members of the community had to follow. The dress that we're seeing these pictures of, the modesty for the women, you could not show your collarbone. So you didn't have to be in a turtleneck, but it had to be above the collarbone, long sleeved, and couldn't show your knees. The boys, the famous, the side earlocks, you can see the picture there. They had to be grown out. They were the same way, long sleeve shirts. I think it's interesting in some of these videos I've seen when you're not as strict, the kids are wearing regular clothes and running around. The dads dress more traditionally. So again, we're seeing these varying degrees, right? Yiddish, you had to speak Yiddish. You cannot speak Hebrew. Now, it's interesting. The author, Debora Feldman, raised in the United States, raised in New York City, raised in Brooklyn, English was a second language. She had to learn it. And I was listening to her in one of her interviews, and she was at Sarah Lawrence University, and she raised her hand and asked a question, and the professor looked at her and said, "Where are you from? That is the strangest accent I've ever heard." And she just died of embarrassment because she'd only read English. She hadn't heard it spoken. So she said she spent the next years in Sarah Lawrence just studying people. How do they say that word? How do they speak it? And she moves to Berlin and she picks up German like that because Yiddish is High German. So she's very multilingual. So the Yiddish, she doesn't even consider herself American, you guys. That's the fascinating thing when I listen to her, because she was not raised in any American culture. She couldn't watch TV.
Right.
She couldn't listen to the radio. She didn't know pop culture. People talk about a movie and she'd just look at them. She said, you are not allowed to develop a personality in the Satmar community. As we go through this, women can't sing. You can't tell your child you love them. So she had to create and figure out who she was from the bottom up. The Shomron are their own internal police force. And this is real. I've seen the articles. They have their own police force. If somebody steals, they find out who it is. They can be on top of it in a minute. And the New York police just kind of stand on the outside and kind of go, okay, we're here and we're going to kind of watch it, but this is a closed community and we know we're not welcome. So it's kind of like BYU, the BYU has a campus police force. Yeah. and they police that zone. And then you've got the Utah County Police Force. I mean, it's just kind of wild how it all comes about. Yeah. Shabbat rules. So, sundown to sundown, Friday night to Saturday night. In this extreme, you had to use candles. You can't turn on a light switch. You can't open the refrigerator door. If they have a refrigerator door, you can't watch TV. Eat kosher. You can't combine dairy and milk. All kinds of rules with that. No pork, no pig, no shellfish. Matchmaking. You're not allowed to go find your love. The parents are involved in that. You pay a matchmaker. And then these strict rules for sex. The author, she meets her fiance. She talks to him maybe twice on the phone, and then they're married. And you're supposed to, we talk about Mormonism going from red light, green light, can't have sex, married. These poor kids don't even get to talk to each other. They don't get to see each other. And then all of a sudden it's wedding night. Boom. You wonder why there's anxiety and stress.
And lack of education, lack of preparation,
lack of education
leads to dysfunction and anxiety. Absolutely. So interesting.
Next one.
Yeah. Here we go.
Now we're going to look at the chains that bind the patriarchy. Again, if somebody could read, I'd appreciate it.
Let's make Landon read about the patriarchy.
Okay. Some girls take the diets too far. Shawnee Wright spends her recess time jogging up and down the hallways to burn calories she doesn't appear to be consuming. Ruchi Hirsch is hospitalized for weeks because she collapsed during classes once. Even her parents couldn't get her to eat. Modesty is the highest attainment for a young woman. Indeed, the modest girls are the skinniest, hiding their natural bodies from the curious view, maintaining the innocence and purity of childhood. How long, I wonder, can girls turn their backs on impending womanhood?
Wow. And I kind of like to think about, I'm just a real fan of Dr. Julie Hanks. I follow her on Instagram. And she has worked so hard to make modesty more than just women in their clothes. Boys can be modest. Are boys talking modestly in their conversation? Are they being crude? We can be modest in, do we have to be the center of attention and jump out there and scream? She is working so hard to turn this corner of it's not just about bikinis and tank tops. And she has a really hard time with doing these modesty rules at girls' camp. Why are girls worried about being modest when they're just girls at girls' camp? Exactly. And this comes up in the book. Debora Feldman, they all go to a girls' camp. The boys are in one camp, the girls are in another camp. They're all girls, and they're wearing swimming suits from the neck down to their mid thighs. They can't even wear a one-piece swimming suit. I mean, again, these policing and these rules just come up in every religious system.
And it's true. Modesty goes so far around that then it becomes sexualization. That's the whole thing. I mean, there's such a fine line when you go around that curve. And I love Julie Hanks and what she's doing. I'm concerned because, she's being scrutinized by the LDS Church. And I feel like, a lot of people think there may be some discipline in her future, but all she's trying to do is explain best practices in the real world, but that doesn't fly in a closed system, in a patriarchal system. So yeah, I thought this list was great. This is a picture from the Netflix series, because women, when they are married, they do shave their head, no longer, can see your hair because that's considered immodest. So they'll wear a turban like you saw in the last picture, or a wig of either human or synthetic hair, but only their husband can see them, without that. So again, I mean, can you imagine getting your head shaved? And the series does a really good job with the actress of just, she knows she has to do it. She wants to do it, but she's crying because the cognitive dissonance of having your hair shaved off for this purpose, you belong to someone. It was very disturbing to watch.
Well, and in the book, it's you just shake your head, you just shake your head. And in the series, her mother-in-law wears a turban. Yeah. She won't even wear a wig, whether it's synthetic or human, because she's going to show she's even more pious. I'm not even going to pretend I have hair. I'm wearing the turban. She's Jewish one-upping. She's Hasidic one-upping. And then the women who had the money could buy these beautiful human hair wigs that came out of India. But the women in India cut their hair for one of their religious festivals. So then the Satmars, the men said, "Oh, that's idol worshiping. These Indian women are cutting their hair for these festivals. That's idol worship. All you women, take your human hair wigs and burn them. You will burn them because that is idol worshiping, and you will wear the synthetic wigs, which are much hotter. Human hair is much cooler." Yeah. And there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, chains that bind, the family bonds and control. Somebody will read this.
Okay, I can read that one. Shea put her glass down and purses her lips. The thing is, she'll show up whether we liked it or not. At least if we say yes, we can set conditions. I can make sure she wears a wig and a long skirt. I will stand next to her the entire time and make sure she behaves. If she does anything out of turn, I will see to it that she leaves. So even this is about her mom, right? Her mom trying to come to the wedding. Yeah, because her mom has left before, but she wants to see her daughter married. And, they're all saying, how can we control her? We've got to control her. She can't do anything out of sorts. If she wants to see it, great. It has to be by our rules. Just like having to stand outside the temple when your child's married, right? You can't go in. You're an outsider. So it's the very same thing.
Yeah, at least here you got to go to the wedding. You just didn't do anything.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So again, the family policing everything. Zadie would go through the house on the night of Shabbat, supposedly to make sure the house wasn't ready, but he's ruffling through their drawers and she's scared he's going to find her book. And, it's just policing within the family. And then the last one we'll look at is the chains that bind, family bonds and control. No expression of love. If you say you love someone, they may get a swelled head. Well, if you get a swelled head, then what? You're vain. God will strike you down. So don't tell their kid they're doing a good job. Don't tell them you love them. She goes through a beautiful part in the books where she knows Bubby loves her, though she never heard those words. Zadie policing the house. We just talked about that. She has a cousin, Barak, who has real psychological issues. And they literally lock him in a room in her home. The door's open, the food's shoved in. They can't handle him. He has these horrible outbursts, but heaven forbid they put him in an asylum where he could get some health care because it's not kosher. So this poor kid who needs so much mental health intervention is locked up. No one's speaking or talking to him because, you could go out in that outside world and it's not kosher. Zadie controls the money. Bubby has to ask for the money. Bubby can't go spend anything on her own. That's her grandmother. Bubby's her grandmother. Zadie's her grandfather. And Zadie oversees all the festivals, all Shabbat. It's all patriarchy. He's the oldest. He says how it's going to go. And the women are not allowed to speak at the dinner table. No women can talk.
Yeah, that wouldn't fly, I don't think.
Yeah. Probably my husband would like sometimes to turn
I was
me
going
on.
to say Landon wasn't disagreeing. You were kind of nodding your head on that one. I don't know.
I could see my husband's like, okay, just for
Like
10
that.
minutes, I'll turn you
Yep.
back on.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Another way of controlling the chains that bind, the power of shame. If somebody could read these 3 separate quotes.
Go ahead, Landon. We'll just
Okay.
trade off.
God lives in my soul, and I must spend my life scrubbing my soul clean of any trace of sin so that it deserves to host his presence. Repentance is a daily chore at each morning prayer session. We repent in advance for the sins we will commit that day.
Jeez.
Page 97, I feel unloved by my parents, yes, and by the people who respect me for being their offspring, and by my aunts and cousins who look down at me because I'm evidence of a familial scandal. But mostly I feel unloved by God, who surely put me here and forgot about me. Without God's love, what chance do I have at happiness? And I want to say, a lot of people say, well, I was in a Mormon home and there was great love. We loved each other. You got to remember she was someone who was turning away, or she was trying to follow it, but she wasn't completely in. And that's the people who feel unloved when they're in these homes, because if you have a gay child, or you have a child who doesn't want to follow the certain rules, then they feel this way. So I just want to point that out, that certainly there's people, they love their family and they feel loved by their family, but there's others that when you don't live by the rules, you feel this way.
And that's conditional love.
It's
and I think a lot of
conditional
people
love.
find that in a high demand, high control religion, everything's great until you're different. And then
Yeah.
you find out there are conditions on the love and the support until you get back in line.
So the last one is, surely that's not who I am. I am most certainly a good girl, and I will make everyone proud of me. If I can make this work, all my shame can be erased. No one will be able to criticize my family when I am a successful, obedient housewife.
Now, I think it's important here to bring in the nuclear family. We could kind of look at this as the proclamation of the war of the a traditional father and mother and traditional roles. So Debora Feldman, her mother leaves her. She's kind of duped into marrying this father of hers that's kind of mentally disabled, mentally challenged, maybe autistic. And she's completely duped, and she's out of there. And on top of that, her mother's gay. And then her dad's raving around the streets. He's unkept. And so because she is not from the traditional mother, father, and Zadie, she's shame. She's the scapegoat. Oh, this child. And she's always trying to prove herself. This is the extremes of shame and what they do. And so coming out of the book, you can see him. It's the modesty. Got to repent before you've even done anything. The mental health, the LGBTQ. That's why she was like orphaned. Her mother was out of there, and her dad can't handle her. We read the quote about her mom at the wedding. Because there's no education, she doesn't know what's happening on her wedding. It takes her a year to consummate the wedding, and that is the most shameful thing known to man. And they just, you've got to have these kids. You've got to have these 10 to 20 kids. It sends her into extreme anxiety. Her husband's extreme anxiety. It's just a disaster for all of them. And then once she leaves, it takes her a good year to even go back there. She goes in a scarf, and she wears sunglasses so nobody recognizes her. But that shame is so heavy, she just can't even go back into her town where she was raised.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I like that picture. I like
and the videos I watched, the girls do wear dresses. The mom wears dresses. Yeah. And it was fun because I was not watching the Satmar. I need to make this clear, but this family had a lot of money. They had a home in the suburbs, and the mom was wearing designer belts, and she looked like $1 million. And so again, they were finding a more healthy way to say, we're still Jewish, we're still, but we're still in the world. It was, you could see, how they were doing it. Oh, they had it was some kind of from Central or South American maid who cleaned up and helped. And so, you can see we can do it in healthy ways. Okay, now we're going to go to the second part of the book, her path to freedom. How she was able to very slowly, one toe at a time, one step at a time. Somebody will read these quotes, please.
In the physics of imagination, this is the rule. A child can only accept a just world. I waited for a long time for someone to come along and rescue me, just like in the stories, because she read quite a bit. It was a bitter pill to swallow when I realized that nobody would ever pick up the glass slipper I left behind. I wasn't equipped as a child to make room for arguments that would undermine every single choice made for me, that would shatter the foundations of my very existence. I would see that I had to believe everything I was taught, if only to survive. For a long time, I wouldn't be ready to accept that my worldview could be wrong. Wow, that's very powerful.
So this is kind of sets us up. So the book is written so beautifully. Each chapter kind of has a quote from one of these books that were how she learned that the world was different. Maybe she could get away. James and the Giant Peach and Matilda, she read that, oh, there's other children, not just me, that doesn't feel like they don't fit in. She always felt like such a stranger. She always felt like she was just never a part. So these books started to give her hope, and they were special children. And she said, maybe I have special powers. It started to give her some hope that maybe she was strong because she was different. The chosen, that's when she learned, oh, he could argue, he could stand up, he could push back. A tree grows in Brooklyn. Oh, she escaped the poverty. Could I escape? Is there hope I could escape? Pride and Prejudice. Oh, there's other areas and cultures where status and marriage is so important. Little Women. Oh, I feel like Joe. Joe doesn't fit in. I don't fit in. Anne of Green Gables. That was hard on her because little Anne was able to win all the family over with her happiness and her vitality, but Debora Feldman could not. And then when she's at Sarah Lawrence College and she's reading poetry, she wanted to understand poetry, and she's reading William Wordsworth. And at college, she started gaining a new worldview.
Now, I can relate to that. I did a lot of reading too, because I didn't have a TV, and I definitely had a worldview that was different from the Orthodox Mormonism I was being raised in. So I could relate to that part of the book quite a bit.
Beautiful.
Ooh, I think Landon's up.
Okay. When I grew older, I would realize that the dangers that movie presented existed in my own community as well, only they were shrouded in secrecy and allowed to fester there, and I would come to the conclusion that a society that was honest about its perils was better than one that denied its citizens the knowledge and preparation needed to fend off their approach. If you are forced to confront your fears on a daily basis, they disintegrate like illusions when viewed up close.
So let me just give a premise. She finds another girl who's a year older than her in school. They're both smart as whips, and they graduate. They're teaching. They teach these little elementary kids, and they escape to the city, and they see movies, and they go to the art museum, and this friend shows her, here's some earbuds. Here's music, and she hears the latest music. And so they go to this movie, and she didn't even know what a movie was. I mean, this was so out of her worldview. And then, of course, she reads that. Oh, that was our group. We're doing this stuff. But they talked about it openly. We shroud all ours in secrecy and shame. Don't talk about mental health. Hide them away. Shut the door. You know, if somebody's practicing LGBTQ, I mean, this is... When I did the research, spoiler alert, a boy supposedly who is masturbating, the father murders him in a very horrific way. Now, they did all the research. This son killed himself. It was depression. That never happened. But the story was going around. If you read the very forward in the book, it said stories have been consolidated and put together. I mean, you don't do these things. This is the secrecy of shame.
Yep.
Okay.
Wow, so many parallels. Timeline to freedom still. Maybe being always protected made me feel more fearful, and I would later dip cautiously into the outside world, never allowing myself to be submerged completely, and always jerking back into the familiarity of my own life when my senses were overwhelmed. For years, I would stand with a foot in each sphere, drawn to the exotic universe that lay on the other side of the portal, wrenched back by the warnings that sounded like alarm bells in my mind. And I could relate to this too, because, I was in Mormonism for a very long time, decades, when I knew that I needed to be out, but I had one foot in each for various reasons, family, fear, whatever it was, or just not going to think about what I don't want to think about. So I can relate to that. It takes a lot to finally jump to the other side in the unknown. So yeah.
For sure. Let's read this one.
It was shame that kept me as far away from Williamsburg as I could get that first year. Takes a long time for shame to fade away, but surprisingly, underneath it, there is pride, awed by the sense of distance I now felt toward what had once been my only home. I nominally saw my life with the strange eyes, and suddenly my past struck me as wildly colorful and exotic. What had once seemed to me the most intolerable version of mundane life was not transformed into a rich and mysterious history.
I think that's
Wait.
now transformed. Sorry, I know I have some grammatical problems in that quote, but yeah, and that's a picture of her and her husband, and then her, kind of more on the other side of things.
Now, I want to bring this up, and I think this is a fun place to do a little bit of discussion, is my husband and I were talking, and we said, she looks at this wildly exotic past, and my husband said, now's the best time in the whole world to be a nuanced Mormon or an ex-Mormon or, stepping away Mormon, because the world's fascinated by Mormonism.
Yes.
I mean, you're the head of the party. I have a daughter who's back east, and it just happened last week. She goes out and her boss just finally said, no, I love all religions. I don't want to upset you, but you're from BYU. Are you Mormon? Are you not Mormon anymore? Well, why? What? And they just start asking questions. Yeah. What about this? What about that? She has a friend who took a vacation to Utah, wanted to go through a swig, wanted to walk on Temple Square,
yep. Like the secret lives of Mormon wives, right? No, I know exactly what you mean. And I think it's like Landon and I and some other people went to, what is it, Short Creek? We went to like an FLDS. Is that what it's called, Short Creek?
Yeah.
What we drove through?
Hilldale.
Yeah. And I was that way too. Like, I'm so fascinated. How horrifying, how exotic. And I realized that outside of Utah, Mormons are seen that way too. And there's so much in the media now that it's a
Mormon moment.
It's a Mormon moment. Yep,
it's a Mormon moment.
Right. Yep. And I like your question. Where are you now? Angry, embarrassed, free? Because I used to say, I don't ever want to move out of Utah because I think I would be too embarrassed to tell anybody that I'm a Mormon. I used to think that, like, if I moved to a state that nobody, knew what a Mormon was, so I better stay here because this is my comfort zone. And if I leave, I can't sell it because I don't believe it. And I don't want to get into those discussions with people because they'll see right through me, But now I have no problem traveling, or sometimes Landon and I get recognized as Mormonish, and we're like, yeah, we're Mormon-ish. We're post-Mormons and we're this and that. You're right. It's actually, something to be proud of your heritage. And that's why I'll never give up the word Mormon, because I'm culturally a Mormon. I was raised a Mormon. I am a Mormon.
Well, and my husband and I talked about this a lot. It was so impressive to see her come full circle and to integrate her past and to be able to see the healthy part. And, that was the question to us. Are we letting our biases take over so much and the anger that we are losing sight of the good and the good that can be done? Because when we get that biased, we're not helping matters either. We're not giving, we're all better off if we can see that it's very, I like to say, small church is about as good as it gets. You get a good small church community, your ward, your stake, it's hard to beat. Yep. And I just think it's important that we get to a point where hopefully we can integrate, where we can see the good, we can remember, we can maybe look back on some people missions where I don't want to trigger anybody, but some people, like my husband served in Italy. I mean, he's climbing Mount Etna. He's in all the art museums. Oh. His mission president was a professor of French. He'd say, go to the art museums. You can cook with wine, make the food.
That's different.
He loved his mission. He loved the Italian people. It was healthy. So I think it's good for us to say, where are we? where are we? And I'm going to end, you guys can say what you want, but I listened to this one, really an interesting discussion with Barbara Feldman. I just tell anybody, Google her. She's fascinating. And this was all done in German. And I was watching the, what's it called when it's done in English?
Oh, like the subtitles.
The subtitles. And she has written a third book. And if you guys want to cut it, we don't need to read that. But in it, she has written a book. So first of all, Debora Feldman was raised that anybody in Germany, they were evil. They were the devil. They were all anti-Semitic. There was nobody that wasn't anti-Semitic. She was raised that Hitler was a demon, that he had chicken feet, that if you took his shoes off, you would see he had chicken feet. He was a demon. So what I would suggest anybody do, she looked her demons in the eyes and she moved to Berlin. Said, I got to figure this out. Boy, all of a sudden she found out, wow, there's a lot of people that are not anti-Semitic. And she has best friends. Her community is Christian, Muslim, Jewish. And she said, we all love each other. We all have everybody's backs because what unites us is humanity. Humanity is what unites us. And she's now done another book on Israel and Palestine because she said, we as an entire world have got to grapple with this. This represents everything that we deal with, us versus them, one religion versus another religion. And she told a heart-wrenching story because, and I don't want to get into Hamas and Israel, you guys, okay? We're not getting into that. But this is the story of humanity. And so when the Hamas, the terrorist group, attacked the people of Israel, it was the most Israel people who had been killed since the Holocaust. And there were very many secular Jewish people living close to Gaza. They're on the kids. They're having a hard time too. They're saying, wow, maybe we need two states. They're seeing the human side of Gaza. This one man, his wife would go to Gaza 3 times a week, pick up children that needed dialysis, drive them to dialysis, drive them back. Hamas comes, the terrorists come. He's defending his family with a pistol. They kill his wife. They kill his family. And the man says, no more. I will not do anything with those people, no more. And she said, I'm not judging. We can't judge. And she started to cry. And she said, I just pray I never lose my humanity. That to me is where we can all ground. May we not lose our humanity. And may we come from listening to this presentation, watching these stream groups, and may we be part of the solution. That's why I came on. I wanted to say, okay, we see these extreme characteristics. We see them. How can we be as part of the solution? Because our church is going to be here whether we like it or not. Help it move in a healthy, more loving way. I want to land with, let's take a hard look at ourselves. Are we angry? Can we see the good? Can we see the bad? Can we have dialogue? How can we be part of moving it forward? Fascinating book. I hope everybody wants to read it.
No, it is a great book, and the lessons in it and the parallels. That's why I thought this is perfect for Mormonish. I love it. So many things that are brought up. Do you have any final thoughts, Landon? This has just been wonderful.
I like to think of myself as a secular Mormon at this point. So
it's true. It's true. It's very
true.
Well,
just like Jonathan Haidt, you know? Yeah.
Yep, that's it. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Nothing wrong.
Nothing wrong. So, well, this was amazing and wonderful. And I'm guessing in the chat we had a lot of discussion because there were a lot of things we covered and a lot of topics. I hope you guys took that poll. That was really fun. So please comment and let us know what you guys thought. Have you read Unorthodox before? Or, would you like to read it now? Yeah, it's so good. Like I said, on Audible. And she's written, as Jacki mentioned, a couple other books. So start with that. And then she has some other things too. She's a really interesting person. So Please like and subscribe to Mormonish Podcast. And if you'd like to be made aware when new episodes come out, you can hit that notification bell. If you would like to help financially support Mormonish Podcast, we always have links in the show notes to donor box. And we just are so grateful to everybody that does, especially at the end of the year. You guys are just being so wonderful and generous to us. And we just appreciate it so much. You guys are just awesome. We have links in the show notes to our merch store if you want to grab a Mormonish mug or something fun like that. And thank you again, everybody. And thanks, Jacki, for coming on and doing the presentation twice in like 48 hours. That's pretty amazing. And thank you again, Landon, for co-hosting. And we will see everybody next time on Mormonish. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Mormonish. We really appreciate our listeners and would love to hear from you if you have a story you'd like to share. You can email us at mormonishpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and on our website, mormonishpodcast.org. And don't forget to look for us on YouTube and like and subscribe. Keep joyful, everybody.